Hey everybody, session number 2 this week. This time we're going to be dealing with kind of parenting, or more specifically what to expect from different age groups of kids when you go home, particularly for the guys, but also ladies, for you to be able to help the guys when some of these things happen, because it's not always what we expect, just like we talked about with some of our other subjects and other topics that we covered. It's not always all that we hope it will be. Hey Taylor, it's not always all that we hope it will be or think it will be, and that can be tough. So again, this is our 4th deployment of coming home to kids, and each one's been a little different. But I've come home to all of these age ranges at some point, and so it's kind of a hey baby girl, and so it's going to be interesting to talk about, I think. So the first we're going to talk about is obviously babies. So we have a lot of deployment babies that have been born during deployment, and I know it's going to be a tough adjustment because for mamas, you've been holding that baby and doing everything, and there's probably a part of you that can't wait for daddy to get home and help out, but there's also probably going to be a part of you that's going to be hard to let some of that go, I think, sometimes. Maybe not, but
yes.
So for the guys, just so you know, looking through my notes here, I'm having a hard time reading them, but it's your baby has heard your voice and maybe has seen your face, but they're too young to really understand obviously what's going on. So take your time. It's going to take it slow. I know when I first held Evan, I think, when I came back from deployment, he was born about 5 days before I left for deployment, and then I left and came back. And it took a long time for him to warm up to me, because he was a mama's boy, and he was about 8 months or 9 months by the time I got back from that deployment. 7 months, 8 months, whatever.
7 months, 8 months, yeah.
So he had changed quite a bit, even in that short time, but it took a little bit for me to even be able to hold him or feed him a bottle or put him to bed or change his diaper, because he wanted to be with mama. So don't take that personally. It doesn't mean that you're not a good dad, and it doesn't mean that you're not going to be a great dad.
Say hi real quick.
Hey, buddy.
Hi, Daddy.
How are you?
We're going to do this, and then you and Daddy can talk again later.
That's Eric.
This is our 4-year-old.
He's our 4-year-old, who we're going to talk about in just a minute.
So
That's the things with new babies. Take your time. Don't be offended. And I will recommend this. So it also can be very stressful, ladies, for the guy when he comes back, because especially if it's your first baby, because he's been over here living on his own, and it's coming back to a whole new world for him. And so give him some time to warm up to the baby as well. I know all the guys I've talked to are very excited to come home and see their babies and hold their babies, and that's awesome. But at the same time, at that 2 a.m. that you're hoping he'll get up and feed the baby, just recognize it may take a little bit of time for him to get used to that, to helping out with that. And guys, you should be helping out with that, but it takes some time. Maybe even the first couple nights, get up together for the baby and for him, for his sake, to be able to take care of that. And you want to say anything on that, Claire?
Yeah, I do. As a new mom that we faced deployments right after having babies, it was hard when you came home to let the baby go to you, even because as a new mom, even baby 4 and 5, I was kind of like, wait a minute, this is my child. This is my thing, you know? And so part of it is remembering, wives, that these children also belong to your husband. You carried the baby for 9 months, and you have been raising that baby and taking care of them while daddy's been gone. And when they come home, daddies do get to have a say in baby, and baby, it will take a little bit for, daddy to get to know how the baby likes to be held. And there's just gentle ways of saying, she likes this, or, and he is gonna, you can't right now, but you can in a little bit, it'll be your turn. Anyway, so you do have that time that you need to ease into it.
Yeah, that's huge, and this goes for all the kids. But so if your husband comes back and is not doing things the way that you think they should be done, approach that gently. I would ask if you going, no, dummy, that's not the way you change a diaper. Just be prepared. If you do that, he may not want to change a diaper again for a long time, and it will be a source of conflict down the road. So be patient with him. If he does things, you got to look out for your baby. I got it. But if he does things a little differently, talk about that. And just because it's different doesn't mean it's wrong.
If he swirls the bottle instead of shaking the bottle, or if he puts the powder in first and then adds the water to the bottles, those kinds of things are not going to harm the baby. Not changing the diaper fast enough, that could hurt the baby. So there are things that you need to say, okay, this is what's best, or there are things that you need to say, okay, daddy's going to do things a smidge different. So
a smidge.
Yeah, a smidge.
All right. So for toddlers, which I would classify as kind of 1 to 3 years old, it's really normal. So we all have this picture. So if you ladies don't know this, we have this picture of coming home, and everybody's there at the whatever they call that, Wallace Creek, and the kids come running up and jumping into our arms like we see in the videos. And that's not always the case, and that's okay if that's not the case. It doesn't mean, again, that you're not a good dad. But just recognize that for some toddlers, 1 to 3 years old, or 4-year-old, 1 to 4, sometimes it's normal for them to be kind of shy, to be clinging to mom a little bit, probably. They may not fully, especially on the younger side, the 1 or 2-year-olds may not fully recognize you, although that's not typically the case now that we have fairly good communications and things. It's normal for them to cry a little bit, maybe even throw a temper tantrum. A big thing to look out for is I know with 3 and 4-year-olds, if you've been potty training and stuff, they may go backwards a little bit in that when dad gets home, because they have to adjust too. It's a whole new world. For them, and so they may regress a little bit, and that's okay. And make sure you're not blaming your husband for that. It's just part of that readjustment thing. Good. Any thoughts?
I missed a little bit of it because of Eric, but our toddler is our baby is 2, and he is going on through, but he's a very shy child. And so it'll be interesting to see how he responds to seeing David. Even now, Evan does not want to get on Skype and talk to daddy. Like, it's just not his thing. Homecoming for last appointment, the way that Eric at 3 was able to really connect with daddy was we sat on the floor after David came home and we played ball. And just by taking that time to be active together and not getting off the plane and getting David in the car and then going out to a restaurant, all these high stress environments for a toddler. If you know that your toddler struggles with behavior at a restaurant, don't make that be your first thing when daddy gets home. Don't set yourself up for failure.
Get it to go.
Out later. Like, get it to go.
Chewy's has takeout. So.
Chewy's does have takeout. But you get it to go to the park. Like, set yourself up for success.
Yeah, so I didn't mention that with the babies, but I'll cover kind of some things you can do to counteract some of these challenges. But for babies, for dads, when you're coming home, the way that you reconnect and bond with a baby is the same as if you had been home the whole time, and that's by spending physical time with them. So holding them, feeding them. Mamas, you got to be willing to allow that baby to cry a little bit so that dad can push through, and it's going to be tough and it's going to be hard. I remember that coming home and having to be like, Claire, I know he's crying, but I got to spend this time with him or he's always going to cry. Yeah. So make sure you're giving him that space to be a dad and to hold the baby and to just connect. Right now, if the baby start crying, Claire's probably going to be like, and pulling her hair out. And I'm like, oh, I can't wait to be there and hear that cry. I know it's weird and it's crazy, but it's just where we're at. So with 1 to 3-year-olds, some things that you can do, Claire already kind of mentioned it, but give your child the space and the time to warm back up to you, dads, or moms if you're coming back. And then the big thing is get on their level. For 1 to 3-year-olds, get on their level. Play on the floor with them, wrestle with them. Play with their cars. It's great. We're coming back right after Christmas, so they probably got some new cars and toys or dolls or whatever to play with. Get on their level on the ground. Don't stand over them or talk down to them. And big thing, dads, you got to be gentle and kind of kind as the first few. It doesn't mean their discipline is out the window, but you give it some time before you start coming back in with the discipline and stuff. You got to give them a little bit of space. This is for the toddlers we're talking about. We're not talking about teenagers yet. So, all right. So that's 1 to 3. Yeah, go ahead.
Moms have been saying to your 3 to 5 year olds where we're going next and where we're coming from, even 2 to 3, I've noticed that with Evan. If you're saying things like, I can't wait for your dad to get back, or wait till your dad sees how you're behaving, that's setting your child up to be scared of its daddy and be scared of the reunion. So it's very important to watch your words and let the children see this as an exciting time because they need that chance. And I know you'll go over that again in a little bit too.
Yeah. So some more challenges with 3 to 5 year olds, or some challenges with them, and again, these are not hard and set in stone. Like I said, we've been through this quite a bit, and they've all been different with all the different kids. So each child has been a little bit different, and each deployment has been a little different with each child. So these are not hard and fast, but these are some typical trends that we see. And by the way, a lot of this is coming from realwarriors.net. So this isn't just stuff I'm making up. Some of it is obviously our experiences, but this is coming from realwarriors.net. They've got some fantastic stuff on reconnecting, not just with kids, but with spouses as well. So I don't want to take all the credit for this because some of this is coming from them. So 3 to 5 year old. I've digressed. So sometimes 3 to 5 year olds, sometimes they're great and they're excited, especially the 5 and 6 year olds. They're excited to see everybody come home, and they'll come running and you'll get that. But sometimes, they'll shy away too a little bit. Sometimes they'll start acting out, especially if they got younger siblings, because they want all the attention. And if dad is holding this new baby and then you've got a 4 or 5 year old, it's very common for that 4 or 5 year old to start acting out. Because they've never had life they've never had to compete for attention from dad. It's always just been them. And now dad's been gone, new baby comes, and now dad comes home and is wanting to spend all his time with the baby. It's a tough balance, guys, and I can't coach you necessarily on how to balance that, other than to say, make sure you're spending that time with the 3 to your preschooler. We'll call them preschooler as well. Sometimes they become more demanding or whiny. Sometimes one of ours would talk nonstop. We'll talk nonstop when dad gets home to tell them about everything that he's missed. Even if you just talked about it on Skype 2 days before, they will talk and talk and talk and talk. And that's a normal thing. And I encourage you to be patient with that. And give them the space to do that. Talk about what they want to talk about. Play the games that they want to play. Go out and play catch, or go out and swing them on the swing, even if you're tired, and try to push through, especially those first few weeks, so they know that you're rebuilding that bonding time.
We've also learned that with our older kids, we can kind of say, with our girls, we can say, give everybody a hug, and then go ahead and give attention to that toddler, the child that is going to demand the interaction, the child that's not going to give peace. Not that we're rewarding their behavior, but that we're investing in that child and filling up their love tank so that child is ready to chill. And then the older kids can understand that. I really want to spend time with you right now. I really want to hear your story. Let me get him situated so that I can focus on you. And if you use communication like that, where you tell your children, I'm not pushing you off and I'm not ignoring you, let me make you a priority by making him a priority. Then I say him and her because that's our situation right now. Our 4-year-old really needs that. He's going to need that one-on-one up front. And then daddy can sit down and focus and be chill with the girls and get all their stories.
Yeah, and ask questions about them. Don't wait for them to come to you, because not everybody's going to be, not all kids are going to be super talkative. So ask them about what's been going on. If you haven't had a chance to talk to them, or even if you have, about their new friends, about books, if there's a TV show they like right now. And I encourage you, and I've done this with all my daughters since they were pretty young, but if you can, take your daughters on dates, even at 3 to 5 years old. And it's really awkward and sometimes uncomfortable because you're sitting at Chick-fil-A and she's just chewing along and looking at everything, and you're trying to have this deep conversation with her. But stay off your phone, stay off all that stuff. Just spend time with her. And it may feel awkward and kind of crazy and like, what am I going to talk to a 3-year-old about? but I promise it will pay you dividends later on.
Mhm. And same with the boys.
With that, and same with the boys too. It's just our girls are older, so that's where we've done so far.
Mhm.
And then the last thing I'll say, and this is really 3 through 12 years, probably through preteen, is it's very easy to come in and see everything maybe that is wrong, or not wrong, but is not what you would expect. Maybe their room's not perfectly clean, or maybe they're talking in a way that you're not expecting, or they're not where you want them to be with their ABCs or whatever. But hold off on criticism. And this is really, really big. Listen to them without criticizing them. So if they say something that seems kind of out of whack or different, give them a little bit of time and figure out where they're coming from with that, if that makes sense. So try not to criticize. Go ahead.
I read this recently, and it was in. No, what did you say? We're gonna run out of time.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
We can do it into 2 sections if we need to.
I read this recently, and it was more important. It was more geared towards the husband and wife, about how while you're deployed and while I'm here, we are living 2 separate lives. Like, we are experiencing everything from totally different playing fields. This whole deployment, we're seeing it completely different. And so, like, things that you're going to talk about and I'm going to talk about, we don't have those shared experiences. We're trying desperately to connect that somehow. But then you add in the children, and I look at the 3 girls that are old enough really to communicate well and have opinions and emotions about things. And I think about, okay, so not only do I have my layer of us being at home, but then there's 3 other stories that have been going on in this house for those girls. And so now when David gets home, because honestly, he communicates with me more, obviously, during deployment than he does our children. He still talks to them and emails them, but they have all of these layers of deployment. So not only is he going to have to connect to them, but they're trying anyway. So I just thought that was really interesting. We really are leading separate lives, and just figuring out how we can connect them to each other. And even and especially with the kids, because they're going to see things from a totally different perspective. So
that can be overwhelming for us too.
Mm-hmm.
So recognize that, and if your guy says, you know what, I just need to go for a run, or I need to go do something, I would say even try to schedule some time to make sure he has that, so you can kind of get in front of it.
Yes.
And it does not mean, I promise you, because I'm speaking from my heart here, but it does not mean at all that I don't want to spend time with Claire or with the kids. It's just I want to spend quality time with them, and it can be overwhelming to have. Of course, we have 5, so it can be very overwhelming, because I'm used to going back to my room and just having a roommate or a couple of roommates or whatever, and we don't have to talk to each other, and we're okay with that. But coming home and not having that is a little bit of a shock to the system.
I'll never forget when you said, coming home, the last deployment, you said, are you going to talk about this? How it was when you come home to all 5 of our kids plus me in our house, and it's like having a blender, and you just take a handful of rocks and then throw in a handful of screws and then a handful of something else really loud and metal and turn it on. And that's how it sounds to you guys sometimes when you come home from that, where it is, for the most part, you can escape at some point during the day. And David has had time to himself to decompress and process and be very chill. And here there's very little amount of time for that. And I needed that reminder from him, like, okay, this is so foreign for him. So I need to be respectful of that. And as his wife, I can read those cues of when he's getting overwhelmed by the children and when he's getting overwhelmed by conversation. And I can help steer that. Not that he needs me to protect him, but I can hopefully help communicate to the children and give daddy some space.
Yeah. All right. So 5 to 12-year-olds, that's good stuff. 5 to 12-year-olds, a little different. Again, all the kids are different, but 5 to 12-year-olds, a lot of times will come, there may be some underlying anger because they do remember, whereas 3 to 5-year-olds may not really understand what 6 months or 9 months means. A 5 to 12-year-old is starting to understand that dad's been gone a long time, and they may not understand why. It's important that you talk now about why. I wasn't going to talk about this, but it just popped in my head. So for better or worse, here we go. About why he's gone. So if you're constantly bashing the Marine Corps and constantly bashing deployment, we've had to be very cautious about this a couple times because, like I said, I've been going a lot the last couple of years, and so it's very easy to get frustrated and not understand why the Navy or Marine Corps or does things the way they do sometimes, and sometimes that comes out well to a 5 or 7 or 8 or 10-year-old. They're going, well, if it's so bad, why would Daddy rather be there than home with me? And they can't process that. They can't understand that. So if you're gonna bash the Navy or Marine Corps or his job or what he's doing, number one, you're gonna upset him and offend him, even if he's complaining about it all day long. It's what he does. And number two, you have the potential to ostracize almost your kids. And I don't know. I feel like I need to share that. And I say that from our own experience. I'm not bashing anybody or anything like that. I say that because we've had to be very cautious about that, not coming home and complaining about, having to do this or do that, or because they will pick up on that and they will think through that, especially our young girls. They're going to, how come if it sucks so bad, why doesn't Daddy just stay home with us? It must look really bad to be here with us. And so just be really cautious about that. I'll leave it at that. It's okay. It's okay to complain about those things, but pick the place and the time. In front of your kids, you want to build your husband up, and vice versa, guys. You want to build your wife up in front of your kids, and build up what he does. That what he does, while you don't always understand it, is there is a bigger purpose behind it. And I hope you understand that part. And the big thing is, again, sharing. Daddy would rather be home, but this is where the Navy, Marine Corps has called him to be. And talk about sacrifice and talk about what that means. And it's okay to talk about that and be honest about that. But try very hard not to bash it too much. So
something else we do, especially with our younger children, is we don't say that David's at work right now. I never tell the boys that Daddy's at work today. Daddy's on deployment. He's on a trip far, far away, and he can't come home right now, because at 3 and 4 or 2 and 4, they can't comprehend the difference between Dad leaving the next day to go to work, because at some point you're going to have to go to the building and leave the house in your uniform. And so a girlfriend of mine, the whole deployment, they talked about how Daddy was at work, but it was far away. And so when Daddy came home and he said, I got to go to work, she just fell apart, poor thing. And it's not Mom's fault. It's not Dad's fault. It's the way that her mind processed it. She didn't understand that work for deployment was different than work going down the street.
Yeah.
Because to her, it was all the same. So we're very careful about that, so that when David gets home, hopefully we can say, Daddy's going to be home for dinner tonight. He's not flying on an airplane. He's not going far away. And so that helps with younger kids. You can even start talking about that now.
Kids too. Yeah.
Daddy's going to come home, and then he'll be home for a little bit, and sometime he'll go, I actually wouldn't talk about that now before they get home. But once they get home, when Daddy goes to work, he'll be home for dinner.
Yeah. So with 5 to 12-year-olds, some things you can do to try to reconnect. Try to, again, praise the accomplishments that they've done since you've been gone. So if they've been playing t-ball or they've been helping out around the house, our Laura has been fantastic helping out with when Mom's been sick and when Claire's been sick. Throughout the deployment, she's just a good helper bee, and Evelyn has too. She's been helping out at our kids' preschool, and it's very easy to come home and say, well, why aren't you this far in school? Or why haven't you done this in school? Or it's kind of like when you go into a kid's room, right? And you ask them 20 minutes ago to clean up their room. I tried this. I didn't believe it at first, but I read it in a parenting book. And they said, if you go in there and they've only cleaned up 20% of their room. So 20% of the toys are in the boxes, and then the rest are still on the floor. Nothing's cleaned up. If you go in there yelling and screaming about the 80%, it can get ugly, as you know, if you have, especially with toddlers, and they can shut down. And the thesis was, if you go in there and say, and just praise them for that 20% that they did right, well, they love that and they want more of that. And I've seen that with our boys and with our girls too. And it's almost reverse psychology in a way, because you're going, man, you did a great job cleaning up your train tracks. Now, how about the Legos and the toys? Can you get those in there too, as well as you did those first ones? I didn't believe it until I went in there and tried it. And next thing I knew, the whole room was clean, because they loved getting that praise. My instinct was to go in there and say, Mom told you to clean this room, and you haven't done hardly anything. And then they just shut down, and whatever. Especially with 5 to 12-year-olds, that's a big thing. So try to stay positive and focus on the things that they have done well, and go from there. And try not to criticize too much the past negative behavior, especially the first couple months. Get involved in what they're doing. Try to go to their games. Try to go to their school stuff as much as possible, so that they know you're back to be with them and spend time with them. So last, I'll say this for 12 to 18-year-olds. This is regardless of deployments or not. Teenagers, I don't know that we have a whole lot of people watching this that have teenagers, but if we do, I'm not going to spend too much time, but they're probably going to act like teenagers whether you're on deployment or not. But it can be normal for them to be concerned about the change in rules. Especially if they're a little bit older teenagers, they may try to play you against each other. And, Mom said this, and you've been doing this, but you haven't been here. And listen to them, listen to their stories, try to stay positive, try not to react negatively when they tell you stuff that may be a little bit of a shock to the system. Share your stories with them, age-appropriate stories, of course, but any positive experience you had, they want to hear about it. And all the stuff that you may think is just normal to you, well, we just went out in the field and sat in a foxhole, but to them, like, it's fascinating to them. I didn't understand, and especially with Claire, like, I would come home, what'd you do? Well, I worked today. Like, I went to work. What do you? And all I may have done that day was sit in 2 meetings and send a bunch of emails. I didn't understand that she actually wants me to tell her that I went to a couple meetings and sent a bunch of emails. Like, it helps her connect with what's going on in the outside world. And it's the same especially with teenagers, when you can connect them with what you've been doing, even if it doesn't seem all that exciting to you. Talk about where you've been, talk about the country that you were in, talk about the culture, talk about, whatever it is that spoke to you, kind of focus on that. And then, again, obviously get involved with any activities or stuff they got going on. And then last thing is respect their privacy, especially if they're becoming teenagers. Our oldest will be 12 shortly after I get back, which is just crazy to me. Seems like only yesterday she was the 6 or 7-year-old we were talking about. So she's growing up, and she's involved in a youth group now, which is insane, because I was a youth pastor, and there's no way that my daughter can be now in the youth group, but she is, and she's very excited about it. And there's a lot of other things that she's got going on that I'm looking forward to talking to her about more, kind of one-on-one. So, and the other thing I'll say with that, and I read this, there's a great book called, I can't remember what it's called, but it's about daughters, specifically raising daughters. You were reading it the other day, I think. Yep, there you go. It's a good one.
It's really good.
It is really good. But one of the things it talks about was
Bringing Up Girls by James Dobson.
Bringing Up Girls. And it talks about how as teenagers, a lot of times dads especially will start to pull away. When they're young, 3 to 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, will hug on them and wrestle with them and tickle and play. And obviously that's got to adjust a little bit when they become teenagers, but don't stop hugging them and being physical and showing physical affection to them, because they're already going through a very weird time. And I don't have to tell the wives this, but when you're a teenage girl, I would argue being a teenage girl is one of the hardest things in the world, because it's 6th and 7th grade and 8th grade girls can be brutal to each other. And so they need to know that they're safe at home. And if you shy away from hugging them or kissing them, or obviously appropriately, that's just going to make them feel even more awkward. So continue to hug, give kisses, or go ahead.
I'm so guilty of that. The babies are crawling over me all day long, and the boys, even at 4, Eric is very touchy-feely. That the girls, I'm just like, out of my personal space. And so it's something that I have to be intentional about, and I'm not always good at it. But intentionally hugging on your older children and showing them that appropriate physical touch that they need to grow and mature. And I actually had a girlfriend who's a chaplain's wife recently post something about what you're talking about, the studies that have been done about showing physical touch to your teenagers. And she said that after she and her husband were intentional with hugging their children more and being more active in that sense of, seeking that out and making sure that their kids always get that, they noticed a dramatic change in the atmosphere of their teenagers and the atmosphere of their home, because their kids
they're going to push you away. Like, they're not going to want it, especially as they get older.
I can remember my dad doing that, and I'm like, oh, fine, hug me, but I remember that. I remember him making me a priority to do that. So
last thing I just want to say, and I promise this really is the last thing I'm going to say. I can't promise that, but I'm going to try it for this to be the last thing I'm going to say. So typically it's going to take you 6 to 9 months, even up to a year, to really reintegrate and readjust. What's that?
Fully reintegrate.
To fully reintegrate. So here's the challenge. So for better or worse, Claire and I are moving on to another station up in Virginia where I won't be deploying for a couple of years. Very much looking forward to that. I hate leaving the Marines, especially my Marines here. It's going to be really tough, but I'm looking forward to that. However, many of you watching this are going, okay, 6 months to 9 months to even a year, but he's probably going to deploy again in a year. Yes. Yes, and it's going to be challenging because now you mix the post-deployment into the next deployment's pre-deployment, and it can be very, very difficult. And this is where starting as soon as you hit the ground, just reestablishing those relationships is so important. I had one of my chaplain mentors, and I'm not going to quote him correctly, but said something along the lines of, yeah, you may be gone a lot, and there may be times you're gone, but you got to make sure the time that you're there is good.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all the more reason that the time you're there is good. So those nights that you're tired, guys, and you come home, especially as you start getting back into the training cycle, and the last thing you want to do maybe is go outside and play soccer or go out and go to the park or do some of those things. You gotta push that extra little bit of effort to make sure that happens. So I hope this has been helpful. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I really want to say, we got into a really good rhythm with our last deployment, and the deployment before that, like a schedule for me and the kids. And all of a sudden David came home and he wanted to read stories late and snuggle and play with the kids at night. And I'm sitting there freaking out thinking, no, the kids go to bed. This is what time they go to bed. And it did lead to some strife between us, because here I am, I'm like, no, we've done this for 6 months and this is the plan and this is how it's done. And there's David, you can't tell who's stubborn, right? And there's David saying, but I've been gone and I really want to enjoy our kids and I want to spend this time with our kids, and it'll be okay if they stay up a little extra late. And so I had to relax a little and give him a little freedom, but he also became more respectful of the routine and understood why we had that routine.
Yeah, there's definitely got to be some compromise and some balance in there. Yes. Because we homeschool, so it is a little easier for us if they stay up a little later. But she knew if the boys stayed up later, they're still waking up at the same time and they're going to be cranky. It's just because that's the way they are.
And then I would get to deal with them all day long while David was at work.
And so I had to make sure, it's kind of like one of those, you don't eat carbs after 5, or some you don't eat carbs at all, but you don't eat meals after 7 o'clock or whatever. It's kind of the same idea. You don't tickle the boys after 7 o'clock, because if you wrestle and tickle fight with the boys after 7 o'clock, they're not going to bed, and then it's going to be crazy, and they're going to be up later, and it's a domino effect. And so just make sure you're talking through some of those. It's got to be a compromise. It's not a competition. Just remember, as we've kind of said all along, you're on the same team. So I hope this has been helpful. If you got questions, again, please feel free to send them to us. And we really do love you guys, and can't wait to be home. And hate the bad part of that is we'll be leaving after that, but it's been a real honor. So we appreciate you all taking the time to listen and watch, and hopefully it's helpful And if you got other ideas or stories or good or bad about if you've deployed before or whatever, please share those with us. So that's it.
Y'all take care, and not too much longer, we'll start seeing people at return. So see you guys around.
All right. Take care.
Thanks.